Okay, so picture this. You step off the train at Gotanda Station on the southern stretch of Tokyo's Yamanote line, 6 stops from Shibuya, and it just looks fine. A convenience store, a ramen shop, a cluster of office buildings, salarymen walking fast, a couple of izakaya already filling up. Nothing here screams interesting. But then you start walking east from the station, and within 5 minutes, the streets get quieter, the buildings get lower, the walls get taller. You're climbing a slope without quite realizing it. And at the top, there are old stone gate posts and embassy flags, and the kind of silence you don't expect, 2 minutes from a Yamanote line platform. Then you walk back down, and the lights are on. Same station, same 5 minutes, completely different city. The question is why? And the answer goes back 350 years. Look at a topographic map of this part of Tokyo, and you'll see it immediately. To the east of Gotanda Station, the land rises sharply into a cluster of hills that old Tokyoites call Jonan-Gozan, the 5 mountains of the southern city. Ikedayama, Shimazuyama, Gotenyama. These aren't dramatic peaks. By any global standard, they're barely hills. But in the flat, riverine landscape of the Kanto Plain, even a 20-meter rise in elevation meant something. It meant distance from flooding. It meant clean air above the river mist. It meant, in the logic of Edo period Japan, status. The valley below was something else entirely. The name Gotanda appears for the first time in a land survey from 1671. The document is the Osaki Mura Kenchicho, the land registry of Osaki Village, and in it, this small patch of low-lying ground is recorded as Gotanda, 5 rice paddies. That's all it was, a wet, marshy basin along the Meguro River, too damp for most construction, prone to flooding after heavy rain, useful mainly for growing rice. While the hilltops above were divided into formal estates for the feudal lords who served the Tokugawa shogunate, the Shimazu clan of Satsuma domain, powerful families whose names still mark the hills today, the valley floor belonged to farmers. Tenants, mostly. People who worked land they didn't own, growing rice they wouldn't eat, paying taxes to lords they'd never meet. For nearly 2.5 centuries of Tokugawa rule, that was Gotanda. 5 paddies, mud and water, forgotten between the hills. Then the Meiji government abolished the domains. The lords went home, or went bankrupt, or reinvented themselves as businessmen. Their estates on the hilltops passed into private hands. The Shimazu family estate, on the hill that still bears their name, eventually became the campus of Saizen University, a women's college whose main building, designed by the British architect Josiah Conder, still stands today behind its old stone walls. But the valley didn't change, not yet. It was still low, still wet, still cheap. The transformation came on a specific date, October 15th, 1911. That was the day Gotanda Station opened on the Yamanote line. If you know anything about Tokyo's history, you know what the Yamanote line meant. It wasn't just a railway, it was an engine of urbanization, a loop of steel that turned scattered farming villages into connected neighborhoods almost overnight. Before the station opened, Gotanda was a 20-minute walk from anywhere that mattered. After it opened, it was a short ride from Shibuya, from Shinagawa, from Shinjuku. Developers noticed, and by 1921, just 10 years after the station opened, Batai, The valley floor had been designated for restaurants and nightlife establishments. The valley had been cheap for 250 years. Now it was officially useful. Then came September 1st, 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake. In the span of a few minutes, the shaking and the fires that followed destroyed roughly 60% of Tokyo. Tens of thousands of people died. Hundreds of thousands lost their homes. The areas hit hardest were the old city center, Asakusa, Nihonbashi, the Shitamachi lowlands along Tokyo Bay. Gotanda, tucked into its valley south of the worst damage, was largely spared. And into that relatively intact pocket of the city, survivors came flooding. Refugees from the destroyed neighborhoods, displaced families looking for somewhere to start again, entrepreneurs who had lost their businesses and were looking for cheap land where they might rebuild. Gotanda absorbed all of them. And in the chaos that followed the earthquake, something else happened. Someone, drilling for water or building a foundation, hit a vein of hot water, a natural hot spring, right here in the valley. In Japan, where the onsen carries centuries of cultural weight. This discovery was not a small thing. Ryokan opened along the river, then tea houses, then restaurants, then gradually the formal infrastructure of a hanamachi, a flower district, began to take shape in the valley below the Shimazu family estate. Geisha houses, performance venues, the whole elaborate architecture of traditional Japanese nightlife, constructed on land that had been rice paddies within living memory. The eastern Gotanda hills watched from above, the valley hummed below. In 1928, the Tokyu Ikegami line arrived, adding a second rail connection and bringing a new wave of commuters through Gotanda every day. It was a city of layers, even then, the respectable and the disreputable, the hilltop and the valley floor, the geisha house and the engineering firm, separated by a 5-minute walk and an invisible border that everyone understood without being told. The war changed everything, and nothing. American firebombing destroyed large parts of Tokyo in 1945. Gotanda was hit. The flower district, the ryokan, the tea houses, the geisha houses was gone. But the people who had depended on that economy didn't disappear, and the men who had been their customers didn't stop being men. By 1946, a black market had established itself along the river. The valley, once again, had become a place of absorption, a place where things the rest of the city couldn't officially accommodate, found somewhere to exist. The entertainment infrastructure rebuilt itself in a different form. Love hotels replaced ryokan. New categories of establishments opened in the spaces between the post-war office buildings, and factory workers from the industrial zone along the river, men who worked long shifts in loud, physical jobs and had money in their pockets on Friday evening, became the new regular customers. The demand, as it always does, found its supply. Gotanda in the post-war decades was unapologetically functional, a working-class entertainment district where the ratio of pleasure to pretension was deliberately tilted toward the former. The geisha houses were gone. What replaced them was less refined and made no claims to be otherwise. The hilltops above remained exactly what they had always been: quiet streets, old money, embassy gates, and university walls, and the kind of carefully maintained gardens that take generations to grow properly. And the valley remained exactly what it had always been, a place that did what needed doing, without requiring anyone to look too closely at how. By the 1980s, another layer was being added. The factories that had been part of Gotanda's economy for decades began to close or relocate as industrial production shifted away from Tokyo. The sites they left behind, large, centrally located, relatively cheap, were redeveloped, and those new office buildings offered something that was becoming increasingly rare in bubble-era Tokyo: affordable rent in a well-connected location. Then came the internet. In the 2000s and early 2010s, Japan's startup ecosystem was trying to find its footing. The obvious locations, Shibuya's Bit Valley, the gleaming towers of Minato, had become expensive. The cool factor had been priced in, then priced out. Gotanda, with its unglamorous reputation and its below-market rents, started looking interesting to a different kind of founder, one who cared more about bandwidth and burn rate than about the view from the office. And here's something most people don't know. A few blocks from the station, on the border of Gotanyama, that third hill, two men in 1946 used salvaged equipment in a bombed-out building to begin developing what would become Japan's first magnetic tape recorder. The company they founded was eventually called Sony. By 2018, enough companies had clustered in Gotanda that they formalized the phenomenon, establishing the Gotanda Valley Association, a deliberate echo of Silicon Valley, with more than 30 member companies. Free, the cloud accounting firm; Narrated, the restaurant reservation platform; engineers in their 20s and 30s, writing code in buildings 2 streets away from establishments that have been serving a very different kind of clientele since before their parents were born. The valley had done it again, absorbed what the city pushed downhill, found a use for the land that the expensive neighborhoods couldn't accommodate, made something out of the margins. Stand at Gotanda Station on a weekday evening and watch the people come off the trains. You'll see the startup employees, laptops in their bags, earbuds in, moving fast. You'll see the salarymen from the older office buildings, loosening their ties, deciding whether to go home or not. And you'll see the people who've been coming to this valley for reasons that predate all of the above, moving through the same streets, using the same geography, as comfortable here as their predecessors were, in the geisha houses and the black markets, and the ryokan that stood on this ground before them. Now, walk east from the station. Find the slope that leads up toward Ikedayama. Start climbing. The city changes around you with every step. The noise drops. The streets widen slightly. The buildings get lower. The walls get taller. The gap between them fills with the sound of nothing much at all. Near the top, if you know where to look, you can find the old estate markers, stone pillars, moss-covered, the remnants of gates that once announced the presence of power in a form that no longer exists. Stand up here and look back down. Below you, the valley, the Meguro River catching what light is left in the sky, the train lines converging on the station, the lights coming on one by one in the buildings below, in the offices, in the hotels, in the establishments that don't advertise their names on the outside. 5 paddies. That's what this place was. And somehow, through accident and intention, and the slow pressure of geography, it became all of this. The valley is still doing what it's always done. collecting everything the hills send down. If you made it this far, thank you. If you want more stories from the parts of Japan that don't make it into the travel guides, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.